Hey everyone! Alright, time to bust out your baby name books, open up your search engines, and get your creativity going. Because today we're talking about naming your characters. I am teen author Noah Barfield, and welcome to Writer's Corner. Alright, so we'll be talking about naming characters today. And I feel this is an important topic to cover because naming characters can actually be pretty tricky. And if most writers are like me, they tend to go overboard on naming characters. It's actually a problem that I have, and you'll see that in Legendland. Some names are a little too complicated, some are just difficult to pronounce, and some are a little lazy, while most of them fit perfectly well, and I'm proud of them. However, I tend to go overboard with names, and I do lots of research, and I actually sometimes spend more time researching a character's name for more time than they are actually in the book. It's a problem. Most of the names that I use are names I would never put my children through having that name, but hey, in a fantasy setting, it totally works. So I'll be covering some general tips and guidelines to help other writers like me rein in their creative impulses and make sure that their names make sense and fit with what they're writing. The first thing you want to do, consider your variables. Alright, so there are actually a lot of variables that should probably be considered whenever you're creating your character's names. For instance, your character probably didn't just pop out of non-existence and be like, look, here I am. Well, I mean, they actually did, you made them, but in the fictional setting, they probably had parents who made them. And these parents are commonly the ones responsible for naming their children. Well, I mean, you do that too, but the fictional parents get the credit. So imagine having a character who their parents grew up in the sticks. That character's name is probably going to reflect their parents' upbringing and their parents' tastes. Also, keep in mind ethnicity. Ethnicity can be a great way to compromise between two parents of different ethnicities, or a great way to remember a character's heritage and ancestry. Keep in mind the time period. This is really only important whenever you're writing things on Earth, but it is especially important whenever you are. You're not going to have 21st century names belonging to a character from the 1950s. You're not going to have characters who were born in the 1300s have modern names. And you're also probably not going to have names like, I don't know, Shakespeare in the 21st century. Keep in mind the time period of what you're doing. Unless it's in the future, then just go nuts. Which brings us to my second tip. Remember the genre. Alright, so it is actually very important, almost critical, for you to keep in mind the theme and genre of your story while you're naming your characters. If you have a fantasy setting, you can afford to have a little more leeway. Same thing with a future or dystopian setting. If you're having a genre set in a, I don't know, actual Earth setting, like romance, adventure, mystery, thriller, then you're probably going to want to go with more realistic names. The names and fantasy elements commonly reflect the personality of whoever they're embodying, as well as their legacy or their race that they come from. For instance, if you're a dwarf, they're commonly going to iconicize the feelings of clan, as well as strength, determination, and resoluteness, like Brunswick Stonebeard. And if you're going to have an elf, it's going to be a little more magical and flowy, and I'm not going to try and think of an elf name right now. If you have an adventurer, make it sound spontaneous and exciting. These things are going to represent the personality far more so than most other things are. If you're using a sci-fi setting, basically anything goes. You can have it futuristic, you can have lots of letters that we don't commonly use like Z, X, Y, Q, whatever you want to do. You can also have ones with lots of apostrophes in them, and you can also even use fantasy names in a future setting, or you can use super old names in a future setting, but you have to keep in mind the genre. My third tip, remember the meaning of the name. Knowing the meaning and how this reflects the personality of your characters in the name is very important. While this is not as important as the other tips that I have, it is still crucial to remember the meaning of your characters' names, because if you have named this character something that sounds strong and determined, and then later after your book is published you find out it means daffodil spreader, you're just going to pray to God that no one realizes that, because if they do, your character is going to get mocked ceaselessly, and then you're going to have to write that into the book, and it's going to be a whole thing. So at least know the meaning of your characters' names. If there isn't one, invent one. That's part of the fun of creating new characters. Now for my fourth tip, alter names of people that you know. The people you already know can be a great resource for many writers, whether that's having a basis for character personalities or having a basis for character names. You can easily alter the names of many people you know, or think of a name that reflects their personality that you can use in place of having to think of one from scratch or do tons of research or scouring baby name websites. Start small with a group of people you already know. Think of how they can actually be used in your context and what minor changes or edits would be required. Also, think of asking people you know of their middle name. Most of the time we don't ask people's middle names until we get very close with them because it's weird for some reason. Ask them about their middle name. It might be surprised of what it is, and you might be able to use that with minor variations instead of having to think of a new one completely from scratch. Use the resources already available to you before you use your effort and energy to go out and search and hunt for more. Now for my 5th tip on how you can make more character names: everything else. Besides the people that you know, there are a lot of other resources that you can use to help name your characters and draw inspiration from them. You can draw inspiration from history, company names, street sign names, maps of different towns and other places that you might visit or that you want to visit. You can also draw inspiration from media or baby books or baby name websites. Though as a general rule, whenever you are drawing characters' names from history, please try and remember our modern connotations that we attach to the names. For instance, the name Adolf is probably not the best name to give to your lovable protagonist, just because of how we commonly view that name given historical events. So please try and keep that in mind. And also try and keep in mind that these names do have to make sense. Yes, you can use all of these, but try and remember how many syllables these names are going to have, whether they make sense, and whether you have too many of the same kinds of names. Whenever you're drawing from historical context, a lot of people tend to use the same names. And there are a lot of recurring themes in different company names, street signs, or town names. Especially there are similar recurring themes in media as well as in baby name books, though these are going to be a little more diverse. Try and keep in mind that you don't want this to get too monotonous, which is why you're using lots of different sources to be able to pull inspiration from. Ultimately, you're going to want to add your own creative twist that is unique to you and whatever story you're making, so that way you don't have too many names that have the same number of syllables, they don't start with the same number of letters, and they just don't kind of all run together. My final tip on how you can help make sure that this doesn't happen is to use other languages. Using other languages to help create names has not only been helpful for me in my writing, but for Legendland in particular, because it allows me to think of iconic traits for these characters and then run them through different languages. For instance, maybe this character is very cowardly, so I have the word cowardice, and then I run that through Google Translate and I find the word for cowardice in Egyptian, Japanese, Greek, and Latin. Well, then I get to combine those different words and definitions and names, and then I kind of pull apart letters and mix and match until I have a name that fits me, and then I can put that on that character. And the great thing about this is that it quickly expedites the naming process, because you don't have to have 60,000 tabs open consulting 3 different baby name books and historical documentary just to name one character. Because after I name this character, if I have another cowardly character later in the book, I can just mix and match these different words and definitions in a different way, and then boom! New name, completely different, still iconicizing cowardice. And it's just going to help me keep these characters straight, because I tend to kind of categorize these names and who the characters are attached to. So using other languages, having a simple translate function that's available to almost everyone can really expedite the process and help you create some unique names. Plus, it is very, very helpful for creating foreign sounding names, which can add a little bit of spice and flair to any story. And now is the part where I brag about my book. My novel, Legendland, this fantastic piece of literature right here that is amazing, is available on a plethora of places. You can buy it on Amazon, iTunes, Barnes & Noble, Smashwords, my publisher's website, or my website, www.arc-storm.com, which looks a lot snazzier now, I might add, and if you buy it off of ArcStorm, I will personally sign it for you. Additionally, there are not only lots of ways to find Legendland, but there are also lots of ways to keep up with me. I'm on Facebook, I'm on Twitter, Wattpad, Goodreads, and I'm also obviously on YouTube. So if you can't get in contact with me from any of those other ways, just feel free to subscribe and leave a comment below. Now, as a final note, I would just like to say that my girlfriend is flying in to visit me, which means that in the next video she will either be in it, or there will be no next video until she leaves, because I have not held her in a year, and I will be doing lots of that, which means I may not have time to record because I will be showering her with attention. So she will either be in the next video, or you will have to wait an extra week for me to put one out. I hope that this video has been helpful, that you have enjoyed it, that you've got your NoFX for the week, and that you continue to enjoy.